All right, and then let me share my screen. Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and share the slides again for those of you who are just coming in. And yeah, welcome to this Thursday's Rubin Science Assembly. So we have another science prep seminar. This time we're going to be focused on time domain astronomy. So I'm going to go ahead and full screen this. And so today it's going to be myself, Ryan Lau, a staff astronomer at NORLab, and Jeff Carlin, who are going to present today. Okay, so let's just go through a quick agenda of what today's going to look like. It should be pretty similar to all the other ones that we've had if you've been attending those. So we'll start off with like some basic instructions and announcements, and then go into the presentation, just like a short 10, 15-minute presentation about time domain science overview with Rubin and LSST, and then focus more on like the actual LSST data products that we'll be using to do time domain science. Then the main focus of this is going to be on these hands-on tutorials. So the way to access this is you want to log on to data.lsst.cloud if you have an RSP account, and then you can kind of just follow along. We have a portal tutorial, and then also two notebook tutorials, kind of short ones. It's also okay just to watch if you want to just watch along. This is also recorded, so you can always come back to this in case you don't have an RSP account or don't want to follow along. And then hopefully we'll have at least 10 or so minutes at the end to go over question and answers and discussions, things like that. All right, I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, but just this is instructions for setting up the hands-on tutorials. The notebooks and the instructions that we have prepped are actually in this other GitHub repository down here. So first of all, if you want to do this, you need to have an RSP account. If you don't, and then Jeff linked the GitHub repo. If you don't, that's fine. You can just request it and then get access to it later, and then rewatch the tutorial after we post it. But basically, like how to access the tutorials in one browser tab, you want to open load up the RSP and go into the portal aspect. And then in another tab, you want to load the notebook aspect, making sure you choose the recommended image and the medium server. I think that should be good enough. And then you're going to want to git clone the repo that Jeff has posted in the chat. So this one here. This is more detailed information. And since I think you all have a link to the slides, I'm not going to go through this in detail. But basically, you're going to want to open up a terminal in your notebook aspect of the RSP, and then just do a git clone this thing here. So you can, if you have the slides, you should be able to like copy paste this. And then maybe someone from the community science team could also post this in the chat if it might already even be there. And then you just paste that into your terminal window, and then you can get the notebooks that we'll be looking at. Okay, so if you're new, welcome. I've talked a lot about the RSP, so that's a Rubin Science platform. If you want to get an account, go to that link, this rsp.lsst.io. So what we have available in the RSP right now is simulated data. This is all part of Data Preview 0. There's a bunch of resources available. There's like over a dozen tutorial notebooks to get started. There's actually galactic objects in DP 0.2, solar system objects in DP 0.3. So a wealth of simulated data to kind of get started in your DP1 and Rubin prep. There's more information here also at these links, and any questions at all, go to the forum, then post in like the support side of the forum, and we'll address your questions fairly quickly. All right, so as far as announcements go, save the date for the Rubin Community Workshop this year. It's going to be July 28th to August 1st, the Marriott University Park in Tucson. So if you've already been to those, that's like where it's typically held when it's hosted in Tucson. I think this year it's going to be a pretty big one because there's a lot of excitement around things getting started. So make sure you see that date. And then, yeah, it'd be great to see everyone there. The next science assembly. So this kind of science prep series that we've been having, this is the time domain one. Next week, the focus will be active galactic nuclei. Here's a more detailed schedule of the tutorials, the science prep seminars coming through. So here's where we are today. So we have AGN, solar system, stars, and Milky Way coming up. So a lot of exciting prep to do. Here's a short announcement about the Link Frameworks office hours. So this slide might look familiar if you've attended the science assemblies, but this is just about highlighting what the Links Framework mission is to enable scientists by developing scalable and productionized software. in collaboration with the broader community. So if you're interested in this, you can check this out on Thursdays. There's a Zoom link here, and then instructions. You can join the Slack channel if you want to ask more questions about the link frameworks. An intro to the Users Committee. For those who aren't familiar, the Rubin Users Committee is charged with getting feedback from the community, so you folks, and then especially about the Rubin data products and the science platform, which is exactly what we're going to be focusing on today. And then they provide twice yearly reports to the Rubin Operations Director to make sure we're getting this provided in the best way possible for the community. So if you want to contact the Users Committee, feel free to use this email here. Here are the folks who are on the Users Committee, so you could also, I'm sure, contact them directly. Okay, let's get started. So what we're going to focus on today is one of like the main science pillars of Rubin and LSST, which is exploring the transient sky. So we may all be aware of this, but the LSST and Rubin will provide this high cadence, wide field survey of the southern sky every 3 days in 6 filters, high resolution, deep sensitivity, and long temporal baselines, like on the order of 10 years. So with all that in mind, it's going to be enabling this unprecedented study of transients and variables with these pretty amazing capabilities. All right, so what types of astrophysical objects are transients or variables? This, I like this plot here. It shows just kind of all the variables in the different classes, and it's actually like there's a pretty diverse population of different types of variables. Extrinsic variables, so things that are caused by not intrinsically related to the source itself, and also intrinsic variability, so things like AGN and other types of intrinsic stellar variability, showing all those different classes here. So this is just a variable, so a wide-ranging class of interest to investigate just these types of objects. So highlighting just the very different kinds of sources that Rubin science will enable. All right, how exactly will Rubin find these transients and variables? So this will be through difference imaging analysis. So Rubin will take an image, and then in 60 seconds, these raw images will be processed. There'll be a difference image template or a reference template that'll be subtracted from that image. And then in that difference image, sources are detected and associated with other sources and characterized. So this is an example here. This is actually using ZTF, the Zwicky Transient Facility, and there's a supernova in this galaxy here. This is pretty recent, actually. So I just grabbed this from, you can look at the Atari's link here to actually look at it in detail. But you see the host galaxy in the science image. You can see that the reference image is much deeper because it's been co-added with a bunch of other observations. And then the difference, you see it here pop up, and everything else kind of disappears, which is what you expect if you have a good subtraction. What about variables? So this is kind of what a variable might look like. Not as dramatic maybe, but that's because you're looking at something that already exists in the reference image. And you can see in the difference that it has this source here, which is a cataclysmic variable from ZTF, has exhibited some kind of positive variability. But then you also see that this bottom right source here in the reference image has disappeared. You also notice that the reference image is deeper, which it should be, because it's built up of more images than the science image here, but you can see that this source subtracts pretty well. So again, if you want to check this out, this is the Antares link to this particular variable. Now, how will we find these transient variables? So, Rubin can do it, the software can do it, but there's going to be like millions of these every night. And the answer to that are alerts and brokers. So an alert contains data for everything that's exhibiting a 5 sigma difference in the difference image. So that's positive or negative brightening or fading source. And so that'll include a bunch of properties of that particular image. So that's astrometry, photometry, light curve history, if there's that much previous observations, and other characterization parameters. So those will get distributed fairly rapidly after these observations are taken and the difference imaging analysis is done. These alerts, since there'll be millions of these, we're not going to get those directly to our laptops, but they'll be passed through alert brokers, which are software systems that will ingest and process these and then provide it in a way where us, the community, can look at the particular types of transients or variables that we're interested in. So those are pretty crucial to enabling science. Here's seven of the full stream brokers. And then here are two of the downstream brokers that do more specific science cases. But these are all the brokers that will process Rubin data, Rubin alerts. And so, yeah, typical functionality, there's like watch lists. We can have alert filters, so you can identify certain types of transients or variables that we're interested in, um, cross-matching, classification, and it's all of it's mainly done through browser-based interfaces. So I would suggest checking this link out if you're interested in the broker functionality, and then just maybe exploring them all on your own. Most of them are already running on ZTF data, so there's already real data there to look at. All right, so now how will we actually study transients and variables? I think one of the best ways to do this is to go and join the Transients and Variables Science Collaboration. So the co-chairs of this are Igor Andrioni and Sarah Bonito. I think I see Sarah on today. And so please go ahead and contact them if you have any questions at all about TVS, getting started. I also want to give a shout out to the TVS members, Fabio Ragosta and Vincenzo Petreca, for their heavy involvement in DP0. So the whole goal of TVS is that it's organized in these 15 subgroups with common expertise and interests, and that they have this roadmap to maximize potential of LSST to study transients and variables. And then down here, you can see a link to the transients and variables STARS roadmap. The other thing I want to mention too is they've designated task forces to kind of address specific goals within their group. So that's something that I don't have included here, but that's something you can ask Sarah about, or check out the slides, or check out the website to learn more. Here's an example of some of the subgroups on the left here, and then just showing on the right the different variety of transients and variables that TVS is kind of focused on. So yeah, highly recommend checking this out and joining up with the science collaboration. Okay, so that's kind of the overview science thing. Now I'm just going to go into a little more detail on the actual data products that will be relevant for time domain science. So I kind of touched on this a little bit about the difference imaging analysis, what happens in 60 seconds, and it gets distributed to users. In 24 hours, this is going to be provided in this prompt products database with all the difference imaging products. This prompt products database is available to data rights holders only, but the alerts will be open to the public, to everyone. There'll be yearly data releases that include like 4 source on DIA objects, co-added images, and catalogs all to date. So there's just a quick summary of the data products there. The actual like images that will be useful, I think, for time domain science are the single visit images. So this is also called like a process visit image, or PVI, from a single detector, which is also called a CalExp. So I think there's almost a lot of interchangeable terminology for this, which includes instrument signature removal, astrometric and photometric calibration, background subtraction, and all the important metadata that we all need to do our science and to make sure we're looking at something real. There are difference images that will be provided. So there's going to be a template image that's subtracted from the CalExp or the process visit image. And these are built up of images obtained in the previous year. So these also have the sources detected in the difference images will be what goes into the catalogs. So any kind of time varying flux over 5 sigma will make it to like the DIA source or DIA object catalog. And that's kind of described here. So DIA source, any 5 sigma detection in a difference image, a DIA source will get made. This includes astrometric, photometric measurements, also a bunch of other properties about the particular variable or transient. There's a DIA object catalog, which are essentially a collection of DIA sources. So these are the summary parameters of DIA sources that are associated in a particular sky location. And this will include more statistical information about the grouping of DIA sources that fall in that particular region of the sky. So typically, you would think it's associated with one type of astrophysical transient or variable, but there could be some confusion there sometimes if it's a crowded field. There's going to be this 4 source on DIA object catalog. So that's forced photometry on all the visit images of a DIA object. So the difference between that and like the DIA source catalog is that the DIA source catalog only flags 5 sigma detections, whereas this 4 source on DI object, that's just photometry, force photometry at the position of the DI object for all the visit images, even when there's no greater than 5 sigma variation in there. So you get like 3 sigma or even non-detections of kind of variability there. All right. So just kind of looking forward to DP1. Here's where we are, what we're going to talk about today, the current where this kind of blue box is. We're talking about DP 0.2 simulated data. But soon we'll be looking at DP1, so actual ComCam on sky data. And that should include time domain products. So like the 4 source catalogs, difference images, and even the solar system processing. So that's kind of the stretch goal, but it's looking, I think, likely that that'll be included in DP1, which should be coming out later this year, like in the summer, I think, is the window for this. Okay, so I think we should go ahead and jump into the tutorials that we have planned. So first, we'll go through a portal tutorial. We're going to be looking at outliers, like how we find the interesting stuff. And so this is kind of an interesting exercise because we're looking at simulated data. So it's like, what do the outliers look like in simulated data? Jeff will go through a portal tutorial first to do that. So get your portal tabs ready. And then we'll kind of go through two, hopefully short, notebook tutorials about how to do this a little more rigorously in the RSP notebook environment here. Uh, so last slide that I have, and then we'll move on to Jeff. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hands in Zoom. Either Jeff or I will call on your hands to unmute to ask your question, or feel free to type your question in chat and we'll answer it or raise the point on your behalf. More information is located at those links down there. And if you have the slides, like you can, feel free to just review this at any time. So yeah, maybe I'll pause here. I don't know if there's anything in the chat that needs to be addressed right away. I haven't been really monitoring it, but it looks like, we're good. So I'll go ahead and stop my screen share, and then Jeff can go ahead with the portal tutorial.
Thanks, Ryan. Hello, everyone. Let's see, there we are. Share. Sorry. Do a little Zoom fix. Okay. All my windows disappeared. Okay. Hopefully you can all see, this is the page that I just linked to in the chat. So you can follow along here. This gives you all the steps that we're going to go through for this brief portal tutorial. So you can follow along here. So first thing you want to do is go to data.lsst.cloud. And oh, that was a dire warning. Let's see if I'm still connected to the portal. Go to data.lsst.cloud and then connect to the portal aspect. And what we're going to do is we are going to, as Ryan said, we're going to use some of the statistical measures that come from the ensemble of DIA source measurements to try and pick out candidate supernovae. And then we're going to see if we can pick out variable stars. And then we'll go through something very similar in a little more detail in the notebook demo right after. But I just wanted to show you sort of the power of the portal as a discovery tool. So first thing you want to do is we're going to query DP 0.2 catalogs. So you want to click that tab at the top. Now you could go here and select the catalog you want to query. We're going to use DIA object and then go and select all of the columns and give it a spatial constraint. But we're going to say we already know exactly where we want to search. So we're going to just copy paste this query, which I will also copy paste into the chat. Try that out. We're going to copy and paste that into this edit ADQL tab. So if you click at the upper right, far upper right, you'll see this edit ADQL, and then you have this empty box here for you to experiment to your heart's desire. So this query is going to, as I mentioned, query the dia object table. So remember, these are what you can think of as an object is sort of an astrophysical object, ostensibly. So we're going to select a few columns. I won't go through in detail what those are right now, but basically fluxes and then some statistical measures of the fluxes. And we're going to pick things where there were at least 10 detections of a dia source at that position, and things that we're going to limit the fluxes so that we don't get saturated objects. And then we're going to select a 5-degree area in a circle about a semi-random position here. And so if you copy paste that in and click search, you should receive 36,000 objects. Indeed, here we did. You can see it. Maybe you can see it. It's kind of small text down here by the table, but 36,322 objects. So you just paste this into that edit ADQL, click search, and it should pull up something that looks like this. So you see the table below of those 36,000 objects. By default, you get a plot here of the first two columns, which are RA and DEC. We're going to get rid of that in a minute. And then you'll see a blank tab over here that we're going to use this later, but or it's possible that you'll see a coverage map. One of those two will appear. Here's what the coverage map might look like. Okay, so now we have our set of objects. We want to, I'll go back here, and you can see more detail about what these quantities are. But now we're going to plot some quantities and then select things that look like outliers in these statistical quantities. So there are detailed instructions in here about how to do that. First thing we want to do is, because we don't need this layout, we want room for lots of real estate for plot quantities. If you go to this, I should do that more slowly. If you go to this hamburger menu at the upper left, maybe it's a veggie burger menu, I don't know. When you click that, then you have, you'll see the results layout. And so you can change the layout of things on the screen. And we want the one that says tables and on one half and coverage images charts on the other half. So now it'll change to that. And then we're actually not really going to interact with the table very much. So we'll just kind of make it small over here on the side. And we just have, now we have lots of real estate to make plots. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on the plus here in the active chart tab. And now I'm going to plot the mean PSF flux in the R band. So this RPS flux mean on the x-axis. And then you can see when I click in these boxes, it gives me the options that I can select from. And then I'm going to plot this point source flux linear slope. And this is a good quantity to help find supernovae, it turns out. And then I'm just going to keep all the defaults otherwise, and you'll see a new plot appear. And then I'm going to go ahead and just click the X in this RA DEC plot because we don't need it. I'm going to make it go away. Okay, so now we have one of our two plots. Now I'm going to make one additional plot. In this case, we're going to plot again the RPS flux mean, but then on the y-axis, we want the sigma. So it's the scatter of the measured fluxes of all the DS sources. Okay, so now we have two plots. You can see that most of the objects sort of lie along this linear slope equals 0 line. And then, and those are all mostly slightly negative mean fluxes or 0-ish. And then you can see there's this plume of things at about 0 or slightly positive with a large range in this linear slope. I'm going to just state without providing you evidence that these are likely to be supernovae, and we can get into that more later. And then you see in this other figure, the x-axis is the same, and the y-axis is the sigma, the scatter of the fluxes over all of the measurements. And you can see there's this big blob in the bottom. Again, if I click on one of these objects in the plume here, you'll see, you may be able to see that it's highlighted now in orange, and you can see it's near this feature, this blob at the bottom here. So you could, if you wanted a sample of these to explore, you can click this box select tool up here at the upper right. So that click that box, you can see if you hover over it, it says select. So if I wanted to select a sample of these to explore in more detail, I can select a box there, and then you see these double check marks. Now, when I click that, it highlights those in the other panel, and it also highlights those in the table. We're going to just use a single one of these right now, because I want to look at a light curve and see, like I told you, it's probably going to be a supernova. But I want to know by looking at a light curve. Okay, so if I select that one point, it can be any one of these. You can randomly pick one and then go to this data product tab at the top. You can see there's this more drop-down menu, and it says you can retrieve a time series from either dia source or forced source on dia object. We're going to use dia source for this, for the supernova exploration. And if I click that, and then I just keep the defaults here and click submit, for my particular object, you might see something a little different depending which object you picked, but I get 65 detections. And I don't want a table, I want a chart. So if you click that chart button there, voila, it looks like a supernova. It's mostly flat in near zero flux. And remember, these are detections in difference images. So this is an aperture flux with time. And so you see it's mostly flat at near zero. There's some over subtraction a little bit. And then you see this big spike over a fairly short time spike, and then decay. Looks like a supernova. Cool. And we'll explore that area, this particular outlier region, in this parameter space in more detail in what Ryan's going to show you in a minute. So that example was to find a supernova, and and it just shows you how you can go and use the portal to explore and test your hypotheses about, like, well, which of these parameters will select the types of objects I care about. Okay, so now, oops, that was the bit, the beginning, or the section, I should say, on supernovae. And then we're going to move on and say, what if I instead want to select variable star candidates? So we'll use different statistical quantities, but basically do the same process. So in this case, we want things where there are lots of data points so that we can get a nice light curve. So in this case, we're going to apply this additional constraint where it has to have at least 30 measurements. And then, so the way you do that is in your table over here. You can see this JPS flux n data. That's the number of data points in our in the measurement catalogs. So we want greater than 30 so that we have a really nice light curve. And if you just enter that in that box and hit enter, you can see it filtered the results now, and I have only 499 results, including perhaps some supernovae. So now we're going to change our plots. So if I just click, let's see, click on the one I want to change, and then click this little gear icon up in the upper right, I'm going to change the quantities that we plot. You may have noticed that we retrieved G magnitudes. So I'm going to select a magnitude because it's easier for me to think in magnitude than flux. So I'm going to select Gmag on the x-axis. Oops, or not. There we go. And then here we're going to select the Stetson J index. This is a longstanding effective way of selecting candidate periodic variable objects, maybe just variable objects, period. So I'm going to plot this Stetson J index in the G band. And if I click apply and then close, you see most of the objects are bright stars with this J index, very low value. And then you get some scatter to higher values. Oh, I forgot to unclick the double check mark, so it's still highlighting my supernovae. Okay, and then the right-hand plot, we're going to, again, click the gear icon, and we're going to plot Gmag again. And then we're going to plot this chi-squared, which is just a measure. It's kind of like the sigma. It's kind of the measure of the scatter over all the flux measurements. And then if I click apply and then close that, again, you can see there's this locus along 0 chi-squared, and then there's a scatter above that of objects that are that have higher scatter. So we're just going to select, again, we're going to do like we did before and hope that we get lucky. Did we select Gmag? Oh, yeah. Yes, we selected Gmag. Thanks for asking, Azali. In the query, I'll go back and show you. In the query, you can apply this function that converts the total flux values and returns them as mean mags. And so, and to answer Dave's question, you won't have any negative numbers in the total flux. This is the measurement from the direct image, not the difference image that I'm showing you here. Hopefully that's clear. So anyway, so as we did before, we select one of these objects. I'm going to select one with a high J index, and you can see it's also above the main locus in the chi-squared. And then we're going to go back up to the time series. This time I want the forced source on dia object time series because we're looking for things that are periodic variables. Means that sometimes in the difference image it'll be at 0, it'll be at its mean flux, and so we want the measurements that show us the entire light curve, not just when it was an excess flux. So we select force source on dia object, and in this case it'll be clearer if we just select a single band. So I'm going to select R band from this drop down menu and then submit. Again, it'll bring me a chart of 96 R band measurements. And then, or give me a table, and then I'm going to click chart. And what you can see here is it's scattering all over the place. You can't probably tell that it's a very periodic variable, but you can definitely tell that it's a variable at this point. And if you want to look instead, that's showing you the direct, you'll see it instead. So you can, it's scattering about 0. So it has both positive and negative excursions. And so then what you might want to do is extract the table of measurements of this object for offline analysis. And so I'm going to stop there and just say, like, this is just showing you some ideas about how you can use the portal as a tool for exploration, and then use it to launch yourself into deeper analyses. And I'll stop there and see, I see lots of chat happening.
Yeah, so Jeff, you had a question from Dave Monet about the negative fluxes. I don't quite remember which flux value you're plotting, but were there actually total fluxes that were negative, or were they just difference image fluxes?
It's only the difference fluxes that show up negative. And so these magnitudes are actually coming from the total flux, which is the measurement on the science image, not the difference image. But indeed, you get lots of negative fluxes in difference images, and my brain doesn't quite know how to process negative fluxes. Um, but you can see, I don't know if I even retrieved yeah, we did retrieve the total flux and the direct flux, which is the PS flux mean, or sorry, total flux is the science image flux. The RPS flux is the difference image flux. And were there any other questions? I might have taken too much time. We want to get to Ryan.
Yeah, well, I think we can pause a little bit, take questions for any quick questions for Jeff on the portal. And there was a good comment from Vincenzo about like if there's some feature that could automatically plot different colors or and error bars as well for different filters, like just like a function that can do that automatically. It would be kind of cool.
That's something we've requested definitely from the
Oh,
RSP. So hopefully it will come along. Yeah, because right now it's hard to, you have to do some gymnastics to actually show the different bands in different colors on a plot, but hopefully it's coming.
nice.
Yeah, I will show the gymnastics in the tutorial in a week from today.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, good timing. All right, so we're going to jump into one of the notebook tutorials. So this one is actually like a DP 0.2 tutorial notebook. So it's new. We just put it out like a couple weeks ago. But it's kind of interesting because it's going to do something similar to what Jeff is doing and look for kind of the outliers and the anomalies using this isolation forest algorithm. So in order to get this, you just go to your RSP notebook aspects, tutorials, DP 0.2, and then it's 17 over here, DIA object anomaly detection. So that's not in our science prep seminar GitHub repository. This is just straight up like in the RSP. If you have any issues accessing this, feel free to ask in the chat. So I'll just kind of do a quick like run through of this since Jeff will have one more notebook demonstration that's very similar to this, except focused on variables instead of transients. So this one, as I kind of mentioned, it's kind of inspired by a notebook and discussions with Konstantin Melanchev. He's been doing work with this in the anomaly detection interest group of the LSST Informatics and Statistics Science Collaboration. So another science collaboration. Um, but it was like adapting what he had done to DP 0.2 to like try to find the interesting outliers. Since I feel like that's one of the first things we're going to want to do with Rubin data is to like say like, okay, well, what's, we know all the world like supernovae are cool, but like, what's the weird stuff that we didn't expect to find? So I'm just going to go ahead and start entering these cells here. And if it takes super long, I have a pre-executed notebook that we can just look through. So what we're doing is we're basically just loading in this isolation forest routine through scikit-learn, kind of a basic Python package. And then a couple other things like the butler, because we're going to be actually be looking at the simulated images to look at the sources that we've identified with this. Okay, and then we're going to start up the tap service. We're setting up the minimum number of DIA sources that the objects that we're retrieving are going to have. So to make sure that we're not getting like weird random artifacts that just have one DIA source associated with it. We're going to look particularly at the R-band filter. So that's just the number of data points we want in the R-band filter. And what we're going to do, we're just going to retrieve like a random sample of up to like 10 million DIA objects or a million DIA objects, and then grab these parameters from their light curves. So this is utilizing the DIA object table that we mentioned. So this is just a tap search here. We're putting some constraints on the type of DIA objects that we're going to retrieve because we don't want anything super bright. I learned through just working on this that if you have, like, if you don't put any brightness thresholds, you're going to just get blasted out with a bunch of saturated sources because those look weird. So those are going to be the outliers. So you're going to want to set some kind of limit on this. And so we just did it at 10 to the 5 nanojanskis. So we can go ahead and execute that. And so what we're going to be looking at are these these parameters here. So these are some of the light curve parameters that I mentioned in the beginning that get run for the DIA objects. So there's like a RPSF flux sigma, which is like the standard deviation of all the R band fluxes that this particular DIA object is exhibited. There's RPSF flux linear slope, which is a slope that's fit to the DIA, all the DIA sources in that DIA object over time. And then PSF flux mean, which is the average R band flux. So there's these statistical properties for every filter in the DIA object table, or in that particular DIA object. Sorry, so we're going to run the isolation forest algorithm, and then what it's going to do is going to look for outliers of these three parameters here. So it's going to look for stuff that's like probably varying or a transient that's exhibiting very extreme high fluxes, has a very fast rise time, and yeah, extreme kind of variability or transient behavior. Okay, so we run that, and then we can plot the scores like a histogram table of all the scores. And the more negative the scores are, the more outliery it looks. So this kind of gives you an idea of what the ranges are. These are the ones here, the ones that are like minus 0.8 are the ones that are the outliers. So these are the DIA objects that the top 20 in this that we're kind of flagging in this list here. All right, so what does this actually look like? Now, this should look familiar from Jeff's portal tutorial. So here are the outliers in this plot of RPSF flux mean, plotted on RPSF or flux linear slope. And then here's RPSF flux mean, and then the sigma here. So you can see that it is indeed identifying outliery things. This one here, we can plot what these actually look like. This might take like, yeah, 6 seconds or longer. We'll see how long it takes. Oh, and let me get rid of this window there. That'd be a little helpful. And if it takes too long, I have a pre-executed one. I know for sure the one where we're going to query the butler for an image is going to take too long, so I might skip to that. All right, we'll give it like 5 more seconds, and if it doesn't run, then we'll just go to the other notebook. Okay, yeah, I'll just go to the pre-executed one here. So what those look like, you'll have these 20 DI objects here. So they kind of look like what you would think as things that are changing more rapidly and have more extreme RPSF flux slopes. So it looks like it's kind of finding what we should find. It's probably still running, right? Oh no, it plotted it. Okay, cool. And then if we want to actually look at what these things are, we can do that using the butler. We can get that going, define this cutout function here. This will just obtain the most anomalous looking target that we have. So the one with the most negative anomaly score. And this is probably going to take some time. So yeah, I'm just going to, oh no, I plotted it. Okay. So this is what we're going to look at. This is the light curve. And we're going to look at a cutout from the peak and then from the lowest flux point here. This is going to take, yeah, 40 seconds. So I'm just going to skip to what I already have here. So this is showing where the max flux is. So here's the CalEps, so the PVI process visit image. Here's the reference template, and here's the subtraction over here. So it looks like it is some kind of transient for sure. Here's the lowest flux point cut out here. So you can see, just visually, you can see that it's fainter in this cutout here. And then just for fun, if we want to actually look at what it is, like what did we actually find, we can run this section 2.5 here using the truth summary table, which is just something for DP 0.2, like what actually are these sources that are being injected into this simulated data. And then indeed you'll see truth type 3, which is supernova. So this is like a 1A supernova that's been injected. So it's kind of interesting that the supernova are popping out as outliers, but maybe that's because everything else, maybe it's just some weird artifact or some low-level variable that's being flagged in that with our DA object search. But this is just a quick example of how you can use isolation forest and the notebook aspect to kind of do a more rigorous anomaly detection through the DA object table to find like interesting outlier variables or transients There's other exercises you can look at if you want to try. Like I only looked at 3 properties in the object table, so you can think of like many different combinations to look at different types of outliers. Um, so this was the transient example. I'm gonna go ahead and pass the floor over to Jeff to talk about the variables, and then we can take questions after that. I could just look at the chat real quick, and then if there's any questions, I can also address those. Maybe while Jeff gets ready. Okay, so I see, yeah, Shreya has a question about the number of detections set to 10. Yeah, you're right. It's kind of an arbitrary threshold. In principle, you could get real objects with 2 or even 1. So you could play around with that number and just see like maybe if you set it to 1, you might get a lot of junk. But yeah, you don't want to rule out anything that might be like a really fast transient or fast variable. So that's something you want to play around with. And there might be other parameters you can use to select those out. And there probably are more robust ways of filtering out the artifacts from the data. But since this is simulated data, it probably wasn't the best to like really do a deep dive into that. But with the real like DP1, that's a really good idea to try to like figure out more robust ways of filtering out the artifacts. And there's also like there'll also be flags for things that are artifacts too, which you can use. So yeah, that's a good question. And then, all right, so I'll pass it over to Jeff and he can go through kind of a similar case with variables. And you're muted, Jeff, if you didn't know.
There, my controls disappeared. I couldn't find it. Okay. So yeah, so this is just me standing on the shoulders of giants, borrowing Ryan's clever notebook and trying the same thing for variable stars. So really Ryan gets credit for all of how cool this looks. But yeah, we can apply basically the same thing, but with sort of different quantities that are more likely to pick up variables than explosive transients. And so that's what we do here. And this is oh, I should note, this is in the GitHub repo that we sent you the link to and that you may have cloned earlier. This is the variable star science demo using anomaly detection that is in that time domain GitHub repo. So that's what we're looking at here. So we're going to do basically the same thing that Ryan did with some additional cuts that are useful for R-Lyrae variable stars. Slight history lesson here, which we'll skip for now. But again, as before, we instantiate the tap service. In this case, because we want both the positive and negative measurements and the zero flux measurements, we want our number of data point threshold to be a little higher than you might for a supernova. So we want at least 30 points. And then we're going to select, again, a few of these quantities, this Stetson J statistic in particular, and we're going to use an interquartile range of fluxes. So the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile tells you sort of how much things were scattering without being completely skewed by extreme outliers. And then we select in a magnitude range because we want things that are not saturated and not crazy faint, and a color range so that we can select things that are in the what's known as the instability strip, if you remember your Astro 101 stellar evolution. And so we're going to do that query. And hopefully it won't take long. Last time I did it, it was not acting friendly. But if not, I have a backup plan. And then, yeah, and then after that, we're going to define that interquartile range, which I mentioned, which is just calculated based on those quantities. And then we're going to run the isolation forest. And I'm going to go ahead and just click execute here, but I have a pre-executed one that I can show you. So as Ryan showed, you get this sort of figure for the isolation forest scores, and you want the most negative. And so we select again the 20 most. Did I select them 20 most negative? 20, yes. And we'll plot them like this. So this here I'm using magnitude, G magnitude, and that Stetson J index, that interquartile range. Again, the Stetson J index, but in the R band instead of the G. And this is that chi-squared that we looked at before. And so you can see these are really outliers from where the majority of objects lie. And then let's see if the actual live one is, yeah, okay. The RSP is not happy with me today. Good thing I have the pre-executed one. And then we just extract, as Ryan did, we extract light curves. In this case, we're going to use, like we did in the portal demo, the force source on dia object. We want the forced measurements. And this is for the top three. And you can see it's scattering all over the place in difference flux, and it's scattering about 0. So it's going both positive and negative. So probably we found a variable star. Also, again, looks pretty good, all three of these. And you can see we get something like 400 measurements, and this is including the G, R, and I band measurements in the 3 different colors. Now, here, I'm going to go a little further and just run the Lom's-Gargle search for periodicity in these objects so that we can see if we can get a phased light curve. If once we know the period, then we can put each of these measurements into the variability curve. And I don't know if this, okay, I give up on that one, but thankfully I had a pre-existing one. So this does the same thing that we did in the previous plot. For the first figure, it just extracts the force source on dia object, plots the raw time series. But then in the second half, it runs this Lom's-Gargle multiband. And this might take a few minutes to execute this cell, or a couple minutes sometimes. But this is an algorithm that that searches for periodicity in time series data. And then once it identifies the best period, then it actually puts all of the measurements into that periodicity and plots a phased light curve. And so what you get, here's the first object. We saw this before. Looks like a big bunch of scatter, but the phased light curve, voila, looks like a beautiful Aurora Lyrae star light curve. You get this characteristic decline with this little bump right before a large increase. And you can see for all three of them, worked pretty nicely. And I will just stop there. I just wanted to add that, like, you can use these just to show that you can use these various quantities, statistical quantities, to pick different types of transients or variables, and then proceed with your analysis from there. So, and we'll stop since we have a few minutes left and take questions from anyone about anything we presented today. And just to respond to the question that just came in, we will post the recording as soon as it's available on it'll be linked from, is it still open? No, I don't still have it open. The Rubin Science Assemblies webpage, which, oh, look, my query just completed. Here we are. I will put it here. This is where the link to the recording will appear once it's available in this Rubin Science Assemblies page. You can see
Let's see. I don't know if it's just Jeff, but you're a little bit laggy.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, but I think, yeah, we caught what you said. So it's through that link to the Rubin Science Assembly page. Or you can look at the community forum too. There'll be a post about this particular assembly. We'll post like a link to the recording on there. Let's see. And then I see a question from Stephen, if you want to go ahead and unmute.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for showing us through those things. It was a little bit of a clarification regarding what products we get. So in the DI object and source, we get the fluxes, and we've got you using a mean flux measurement, which seems to be weighted. Is there any information about how you're weighting, or is that just kind of basic flux error, root flux error? Sorry, root flux to give you an error, and you're weighting the means that way. And then when you present the light curves, they should just be raw flux, right? Without any kind of weighting. That should just be off the CCD fluxes when you're observing the light curves.
Yeah, so the actual, yeah, the photometry that's provided in like the DIA source catalog of a particular from a difference image, that'll be, yeah, just the straight up photometry. I think there's aperture and also PSF photometry from the difference image. There's the total flux as well that's extracted from just the process visit image, the CalExp file. And yeah, your question about the weighted mean. I can't exactly remember how it does the weighting, but we can check out the description of each of the properties, and it should have a description of how it actually does the mean. It also might change, I think. I'm not 100% sure between what's provided in DP 0.2 and what's going to be in DP 1. But yeah, we can look for like the table that describes exactly what the those parameters that we're looking at are, like the mean and the weighting that might go into that.
That's great. I had a look at the schemas, but it didn't seem to provide any more information than it is weighted. Because we noticed this is a problem that we identified in Gaia, that when you're weighting fluxes to try and calculate like mean magnitudes and things like that, how you weight can affect your results, because if it's got quite large variability amplitude, or there's a large difference between max and min flux, you're then weighting to the fainter end of the distribution, because faint fluxes have lower associated uncertainties in that sense. And then these are all the products that you've spoken about today about the DIA source and object. You've mentioned a DIA catalog. Is that going to go through a slightly different pipeline? Is sort of like, can we change the parameters that are going into the catalog for the data releases, or are we going to get effectively similar parameters?
Right. So there's going to be annual or yearly catalogs that come out. And that'll include like force source on DA object. So those might be slightly different than what comes out immediately. I'm not sure if it's set yet, like how the difference or reference subtraction will be done, because after the end of a year, you'll have more coads in your reference template to do the subtraction. So there might be some changes between what's provided in like the prompt products from the DIA source and DIA object catalog and the yearly products. So yeah, that's my interpretation. Let's see if there's anyone else that has more feedback on that. I'd be happy to hear it. But that's a good question. And then yeah, before we get to that, so Stephen, I'll follow up on the weighted mean, because I see what you're saying about how it can affect your kind of statistics or the sources that you're looking at. So I'll see if I can track that down and then follow up with you on that.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're at the top of the hour, but yeah, if anyone has, let's see if anyone on the computer science team or anyone who knows can address Stephen's question about the differences between the yearly and the prompt products, maybe real quick. Yeah, if there's anyone who wants to chime in on that. Yeah, if not, I'm pretty sure that's the difference. But again, I can double check and then follow up if what I said was incorrect.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
don't know the answer offhand or else. So I won't muddy things by trying.
Yeah,
I'm going to
sounds
stop
good.
the recording, and if anyone has any quick questions that they want to ask after. If I can find the button. Oh, I guess I can't stop. Then feel free to stay on for a minute to ask your question. Although there we are. Stop recording.